by giving a part of myself. This is our march. This is my march as an artist. You know, I wasn't, you know, marching and things like that, but I feel like this is the way I'm active, and I use. They say that you could use your body, you could use your spirit, you could use your intelligence and wit to give to this. This is my part of the movement, and I feel it's every single other person. And Barack Obama did say to me, he said that there would be no Barack Obama if there wasn't a Bayard Rustin.
Colman, great to see you. And I think that one thing that we're going to focus on Rustin.
Okay.
But you have been an actor for how long at this point?
33 years.
33 years.
I look very young, though, right?
Absolutely. I know.
How is it possible? He's only 35.
Exactly. We recently were lucky enough to have you join us for the Hollywood Reporters Actor Roundtable, and you talked about something that the others, you know, kind of perked up about with your history in equity, and just to remind people, this is an actor's actor. You didn't roll out of bed and wind up in the lead of this or any movie. You know, some careers it seems like that happens, and God bless them. But yeah,
and I'm one of those. I feel like I truly consider myself a journeyman. I've been doing this work and started in regional theaters, you know, from, you know, Jiva Theater in Rochester, Indiana Rep, anywhere I could do work. And you know, any time I could do my work, I felt like I was successful, you know. And, you know, I was always going back to whether I lived in San Francisco or New York, and I would bartend or wait tables. But that was success. It was like, this is the life I committed to as an artist. It's like, this is actually what it looks like. It's building work and worlds wherever I was. And I said at this roundtable, I said, the thing that I realized that I was, and I've always been for so long, is the equity deputy. Right. You too? Yeah, right. And most of the time, no one wants to be the equity deputy, right? They're like, oh, who's going to be an equity deputy? And everyone's turning around and hiding. And then people would always nominate me. And I didn't understand that for a long time. I'm like, why me? But they knew that, I guess, and I didn't realize this until years later, that I do have a sense of diplomacy and trying to look at the soul of the production and be fair and listen to the producers and the actors and the artists, everyone, and advocate for the health and well-being of the production. And so after a while, you know, the moment we're sitting at, you know, at some small professional theater off Broadway, they're like, okay, we're going to nominate the equity deputy. I'm like, I'll do it. I'll do it. And I actually really enjoy doing it. And it's like, I don't think of myself as someone who's like wanting to control anything. I just know that I wanted to be a great advocate. And I knew that, like, when I had a film like Rustin, I could lean on those skills. I'm like, oh no, I've been an equity deputy for years. You need that to play a leader like Bayard Rustin. You need that to lead a film like Rustin. Yeah.
And I think a key thing that we have to note, first, a couple of facts, stats. You have won an Emmy for Euphoria. You have received Tony nominations for acting in the Scottsboro Boys and producing Fat Ham. You've been in so many important movies, Selma, Lincoln, we could go on and on. Zola recently, a great part. But this was the first time you were ever offered the chance to be number one on the call sheet for a motion picture. So that's kind of amazing. When did that sink in? That was finally. I mean, did you always believe it would get there to that point?
I'll be honest, I never thought about it. I never thought about it because I was too busy working.
Right.
And working in things that I felt mattered. And it really didn't matter to me whether or not I was number one or number 52. My first films, I did background work as well. I respect that because I feel like everyone has a job to do. And so I was too busy working, and I didn't even realize it, that I'd never been number one on the call sheet. I didn't realize it until suddenly this opportunity came. But I realized, and I think the blessing for me is 33 years into my career, I had everything that I needed to do a film like this. I needed all those times when I was doing something else as an artist, and people can call it a struggle. I've never felt like I was a struggling artist. I never considered that. I thought this was the life. I was an artist. It's like no one can tell me that, just because I'm bartending these shifts and then I'm auditioning here and I'm writing this thing and trying to get this going and it's like, no, that's the life of an artist. And I felt successful then. So I was too busy actually just doing the work. And so when it did happen for me to leave this film, I just knew I had to call in all those skills. Right. And then, I could only do it with that. So
a lot of people, we're not familiar, and I think it's part of our an issue with our education system in this country and all kinds of things. But like Bayard Rustin is not a household name. Yeah. When in your life did you first hear about him? And in fact, I think you kept hearing about him right after that. Yeah.
I first found out about Bayard Rustin when I was about 19 years old at Temple University, when I joined the African American Student Union. Why? Because I felt like I needed to know more about my history. And so we would meet maybe I think once a month or something like that. And we talk about topics, and we're talking about the March on Washington. And Bayard Rustin's name came up, but it came up in a way of like, who is this person who played the lute and sang Elizabethan love songs and, had a mid-Atlantic standard accent, was a star athlete, and he organized the March on Washington and was openly gay. I was like, wait, how come? Wait, why don't we know about him? That's a lot of person to be hidden in the history books, who was so profound and significant. So I looked at him, and I guess maybe sort of I downloaded, as we do as artists, we sort of download information and hold it with us, and maybe it helps us with how we navigate our careers, our journeys, whatever way. But I think it did. I think that Bayard was impressed upon me in a way of being, and how do you be in the world and take up space and own your power. So that was when I was 19. And honestly, I think now it just struck me. When I was in my early 20s, I was doing things like starting my own theater companies and things that like, I don't know where that comes from. I always believed that like I had power. Now I come from inner city West Philadelphia, working class parents. And I think the world was designed to tell me that I didn't have power. But somehow there were some things that have been downloaded that make me believe that if I create it, if I make it, I can have access, and no one can take away my intelligence and my humanity. I've always believed that. And so that's helped me navigate. So years later, it kept coming up. Every time someone said, hey, it was almost like a secret society when someone said, hey, when they do a biopic about Bayard Rustin, it's got to be you. I was like, yeah, you think so? They're like, yeah, it's got to be you. And I didn't know that maybe I had more qualities that they saw in me. But I guess we have been living sort of in concert with each other for years. I'm still sort of unpacking what that is, but I do know that there's something. I believe Bayard was calling on me, and maybe I've been calling on Bayard, and that's how we created this film together.
And the way specifically that it came about. So George C. Wolfe was making Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, comes to you to be a member of Ma Rainey's band. Amazing cast: Chadwick Boseman, Viola Davis, Glenn Turman. And I guess, can you characterize that experience? And because obviously it made a big impression on George when he's now subsequently thinking about what to do with Rustin.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I didn't think George liked me. I auditioned for George C. Wolfe, the great legendary George C. Wolfe, at least 5 times in my career when we were in New York. He still doesn't remember it, apparently. I said, no, I've auditioned for you. And, I had callbacks, and, I just thought that I'm not going to get that opportunity. And so, life goes on, careers go on, and suddenly I get an offer, a direct offer to be in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Is this the George C. Wolfe? Wait, he likes my work? He wants, what? Are you kidding? But so I take that journey with them, and I think we got a chance to not only learn about each other as artists, but as human beings. And I think whatever he saw in me, I think maybe he saw that equity deputy in me. He saw that I think I like to have a good time, and I like to, I enjoy my work, and I work and I know I have a rigor to my work. and that rigor is not, and I don't want to make it sound like it's hard, but I'm like, when it comes to research and respect for the work, but also how we make the work, I think that he saw that in me. And so when he had this opportunity to direct Rustin, and it was funny, it sort of floated from different people actually at first, and then it finally landed in George's hand. Now I've already known that they were going to make this film, and then so I laid back. I respect my. I'm not someone who advocates hard for a role. I just don't think that makes sense to me. It's like, I think I want to trust that that I have qualities that I could use to be a part of it. Again, maybe that's part of owning my power and not giving it away, where I'm like, you do what you need to do. Do what's best for you. I know what I can give, but if you think that other person can give, I leave it to you. I think maybe that's why I'm able to hopefully have a healthy mind and existence in this industry, but I think that's the things that I continue to download. So anyway, George makes his decision, and still to this day, I can't be more grateful. I just can't. It's and I don't know, excuse me, I don't like being like this, but I feel like it's a tremendous weekend. And, it's like, listen, I'm speaking to fellow actors here. I think, there's these moments when you didn't know certain things were available to you, but you just keep going and you keep creating. You keep creating when there aren't opportunities. And then suddenly you have a weekend like this when people are constantly asking, how does it feel? How does it feel? Well, I'm telling you, it feels real good. and it takes my breath away sometimes, and this is one of those moments, sitting here with this man talking about something I love. What a gift. What a gift.
Overdue and well-deserved. So you talk about the rigor, and I think we should highlight that here, because you have a script, obviously, but then you take it the extra 5 miles. What are the, talk about what beyond the script you did to get ready to play Rustin?
Well, the moment I found out that this opportunity was mine, I could have gone into sheer terror. But the thing I do, I'm like, oh God, now I have to create this character and do this work. Let me get to work. So that's the only way I'm like, and to avoid the terror, is I go to work and I go to research. And I had about 5 months to prepare. And so I put myself through my own rehearsal process, because just the way I respect the work. I will go and I will research everything I could, not only about Rustin, but about the times he was living in, and not only 1963, but I would take it back to the 1940s and take about what he knew, who he met with, whatever research that I could. And then so I did that. And then I look at any interview that he had. And that's when I start to find his way of speaking, the way he sort of like had a potency and fire and fuel to the way he spoke. It always had sort of like love underneath it. That's what I took from it. And also he spoke in his own mid-Atlantic standard way of speaking. He created it himself. That was also a key to the characters. Like, who creates their own way of speaking? Because this man, he sounded like Katharine Hepburn at the time. And then at the time, it was like highly British, very RP. And I was like, well, what is this accent? He's from Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'm from Philly. We don't sound like that. So I went into, took a deep dive, and then started to find ways of like how, and he also spoke with a very sort of thin, reedier voice than mine. So his probably pitched like 3 octaves higher. And I went to find a place, George and I wanted to discover a place that was really performative, that had some size to it, because people say, someone said to me last night, oh, it was almost like, it was very brave of you to like perform a character with that much size. I said, I didn't create it. That was him. I said, I dialed it down a little bit. Actually, I said, no, but he sort of like lived, he was an outlier, and he lived in this sort of, he created his way of being through the world. And that I think was part of his armor and part of his intelligence and his owning his power in spaces. So from that, I had to create, his vocal capacity, and then I looked at a lot of visuals of the way he moved through spaces, and wanted to make choices on how he would stand in a room that he was uncomfortable in, like from imagery, like when he's with the NAACP, and even making decisions with the costume designer, like making his suits not fit as well, as he's trying to conform and be sort of a regular brother. You know what I mean? And then there are times when he's, feeling more liberated, when he's with young people and his arms are flung open wide and he's using his body more like a ballet dancer, or he's got his hand up against his hip in certain ways. And the costumes help construct all that. So making all these decisions and also having access to people who loved him, that's towards the end of not the end of my process, but when I feel like I have a handle on this person, and then I can ask questions from people who loved him. What did he like to eat? What was his laugh like? How did he make you feel? All that stuff to create the soul of a person. Because again, I didn't want to mimic him. I wanted, if anything, I wanted you to feel the soul of Bayard, and really, so you feel like, oh, I think I understand who he was. And it invites you to go and find out more about him. And not only him, for me, it was about like finding out more about all these other unsung heroes in the film. So that's what I do as an artist. I create, again, I come from the theaters, and I only know, I consider myself a tried and true character actor who know I have to build a character from the ground up in every single way. So it's my job to be in service to the character, and sort of Colman can fall back. He falls back, but I bring in all my soul and everything else to help fuel this person. So you get Bayard and a little less of me, but then you sort of get both of us.
Was there one scene that maybe was the most daunting for you to approach? Was there something that you found intimidating?
There was one moment, the moment with Martin Luther King towards the end. And there was a scene actually before then when I was talking to Tom, my assistant, and wrestling with the fact that, the shame of Pasadena. There was an actual scene that we filmed. And then I go from there to Martin. And I knew that like I had to learn, I learned all my dialogue before I even got to set, because I knew I had to. I couldn't learn my lines and run a set in a way, and just make sure everyone was feeling good and moving it along. So basically, when we got George, my director is such a beautiful director. He rehearses every single scene before we shoot it with a private rehearsal, and not private like with a AD and a DP there, but private, just directors and actors. So you can actually feel liberated to make mistakes, to try something new, all that stuff. Rehearsal did not stop. And so I had a sense of play the entire time. But this one scene in particular, I said, I actually know I couldn't rehearse it. I had to just because we filmed it pretty late in the game. And so I had the weight. At some point, as we know this, at some point, you know more about the character and it's living in you. And it's even not much you can discuss. You're like, oh, I have ownership of this character now. So George even asked me, he looked at me, he says, Colman, do you want to rehearse this scene? I said, I don't know. I don't think it went that way. I actually said, George, can we just go for a take? He said, oh, because it was new, because we rehearsed every scene. I said, I like to it's raw. I actually don't think I can be in my head about it. I just have to let it fly. And so I went in there, and a Melamine was standing. We will go in there. And I think that's what was used here was the second take, because the first take was just raw. And then for me, it was like, okay, that's that one. Now I want to make sure that it's nuanced in a way, and what George wanted, like strong, because George would allow me to make sure we can do it. We had 50 different takes that he could use. But this was the most challenging, because I wanted to be very honest, because for me, it was the center argument of our entire film. It was everything that he couldn't say, that he had been, there's a tension that George wanted to build through the film where I didn't release yet. I didn't get a chance to let it out. I let it out eventually when, Martin Luther King on television, and suddenly that's the release. But he said, you don't get to do that until then. You keep it taut. You keep the energy going. And so for that, I needed to just actually be very clear and succinct with my language and talk about what this film is about. Is either you believe in freedom and justice for all, or you do not.
I'm gonna close this, prefacing the last question with just a few facts that are, I think, of interest to people. it's kind of interesting that one of the executive producers of this is like Bayard Rustin, originally a community organizer by the name of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as well. Point number one. Point number two, you have another great performance this year, just as well in The Color Purple. Just noting this year. And lastly, I just wonder if you can talk about, I think this is, on one level, it's irrelevant. This movie is brilliant. It stands alone. But what I want to just note, if you want to note it, if you want to comment about this, it is pretty, I think, unprecedented. Rarely is that word actually used appropriately, but the writers, director, producers, and lead actor of this film are all openly LGBT, etc. That I just wonder if if that has particular significance to you.
Well, now do you see it that way? You know what? I guess maybe there is something, I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious, but I think it was something that made sense for Bayard and his legacy, to make sure that the hands that created it truly understood. And it's part of our DNA, every single person, whether it's Bruce Cohen, who is truly one of the most beautifully politically charged people, humans. I believe he's on the president's, he's on the Arts Commission in DC as well. And then you have, Dustin Lance Black, Julian Brees, George C. Wolfe, who he's such an archivist about the history of African Americans, especially and LGBTQIA plus as well. It's really remarkable. And then for me to actually portray this as well, I know that there's, not to say that not another actor couldn't do it, but I know that there's a lot that I have inside of me. There's a fearlessness when it comes to certain things that I know that I can tap into, that I knew was required for a film like this. Not for every film, but for this, it was required. That you lay it bare and you lay it raw, and it's a part of your soul. It's a part of, I don't know. The way you just made me think, honestly, I know for sure. I know this for sure. This is very much a legacy work. And and every single person who was involved in this feels like, hey, if I don't do anything else, I know that I feel like I move the needle in our humanity in some way, shape, or form by giving a part of myself. This is our march. This is my march as an artist. I wasn't, marching and things like that, but I feel like this is the way I'm active, and I use. They say that you could use your body, you could use your spirit, you could use your intelligence and wit to give to this. This is my part of the movement. And I feel it's every single other person. And Barack Obama did say to me, he said that there would be no Barack Obama if there wasn't a Bayard Rustin.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Colman. Colman Domingo, everybody.
Thanks. And thank you, Scott.